Hello, everyone. Jeff here from Coach's Call. And then today I got a special guest. It's his first time, new face, new to the Discord, local boy from where I'm from, Mr. K. Bam. How you pronounce it?
Beam.
Beam. K
Yeah.
Beam. So K Beam, you want to introduce yourself, tell us a little about you?
Yeah. I'm Kyle. I've been in the Discord probably for about a month and a half, 2 months now, maybe. It's a great fun environment. I met Puff at a high school football game randomly. So very glad I got to meet Puff and glad that I got to join like this kind of like family in this Discord that they have. It's a great environment. I love it.
Yeah, for sure. Make sure you guys check that out. Coaches Call, Discord, TikTok, all social media. But today we are here to talk about this wonderful college football season and week 8 this week. We're gonna break down a few of these games that are supposed to be really good games. It's a decent slate this week, and I'll give it to you. But first, let's do a little bit like a half the season summary. What's the team that you find most impressive this year so far?
I mean, most impressive and I think most consistent. I mean, it has to be my Penn State Nittany Lions, like
Yeah.
can you really bet against Penn State right now? Like, tell me they haven't looked like a really consistent football team. They've
Yeah,
won just about every game by about 25, 30 points.
I agree. We'll come back to that game later this weekend. But for me, I'd have to say it has to be Washington. Like they, I'm normally a Pac-12 hater because I think that anything from out west is soft, but that quarterback got them playing really good ball. I mean, they should have lost to Oregon, but it's games like that where these teams make runs and then they make it to the playoff. But what's the team you think most disappointed? Like,
Wisconsin, easily
was
Wisconsin. I was so high on Wisconsin this preseason. I thought Wisconsin was going to win the Big Ten West, and they were even going to compete like in the Big Ten and maybe be even in the playoff race. But I mean, I don't know what is going on at that Wisconsin University, but it is not pretty. It's not been pretty so far for them.
yeah, yeah. For me, I'd have to. I know this sounds really square, but I'd say Bama. Like this is probably one of the worst. They only lost one game, but this is arguably one of the worst Bama teams I've ever seen. And they're gonna lose another game before the end of the season. They aren't gonna make the playoff. Um, but let's come back to that first question. How about Missouri? Like, where did they come from? That's my question because they look solid this year.
Missouri looks like, I mean, they do look like a great, great football team, And Missouri in the offseason, looking at the roster, seeing that they had a lot coming back. I was high on this team, but not like to the point where like they were going to be 6-1 heading into week 8 like that. I was not expecting that at all. I'll tell you that one bit.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy. So yeah, let's jump right into it. Let's go to the big one this weekend, Penn State, Ohio State. Let's break it down. I mean, Penn State defense versus Ohio State offense. That's kind of what I'm getting out of this. It's gonna be Penn State's gonna be running the ball a lot. Ohio State, they're gonna try to throw on Penn State's defense. What are we thinking?
Crazy enough, I think this is actually going to be because it's going to be raining tomorrow. So I think a defensive battle is what's going to take place at the Horseshoe tomorrow at Ohio State. I think this is going to be a low scoring game. It's going to be a hard fought battle, and I think it's going to be whatever defense can make that big play to get the job done. I think that's really what's going to stand out tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at it now when if it's gonna be a run the ball game, Ohio State's not gonna be able to move the ball in that defense. Penn State gives up 72 yards a game on the ground, and
Mhm.
Ohio State, their weakness is running the ball. They only put up 135 a game. So I think if it has to come down to that Ohio State's gonna struggle a lot. And Penn State, their defense is so solid. I mean, now granted, this is gonna be their first test, but you could say Iowa was their first test too, and they beat them 31-0. That Iowa team, that's when they had McCarthy, they had the tight end, they had everybody, and they looked like a solid team going into that game, and they just got hammered. So, I mean, we'll see. What do you think? Anything else?
Definitely. I think if it turns into a run game, Penn State, it's definitely going to favor them more. As Drew Aller has not looked good on the road at all this season, so I think if they can get the pressure off of him to be able to turn this into a run type game, that's going to benefit them in that type of environment. Drew Aller, he's a first year starter, so these big road games like that,
Yeah.
you expect him to struggle. Even though he's was the number one quarterback in the country you know, coming out of high school, you still expect these. He's just a kid, you expect him to struggle in a game like environment like that for first time ever.
Yeah, yeah, I expect them to use the run to open up the throw for sure. Um, so let's go on to the next one, the next big game, the one that separates the discord like the Red Sea. We're gonna go Tennessee on one side, Bam on the other. The battle of both teams that arguably could have been the biggest letdowns this season so far, but they both are one-loss teams. Don't count them out of the playoff. What are we thinking?
I'm thinking on this one, this game, it's one of those hyped up games that you feel like could turn into just an absolute shit show. I feel like, with Joe Milton, I feel like Tennessee fans coming into the season, I feel like Tennessee fans, after the last season that they had, they were expecting to do that again. I feel like that's the vibe that I was getting from the Tennessee fans and the Tennessee fans that I know. And I feel like people were expecting Joe Milton to play like Hendon Hooker last year, and it just hasn't been that. So I think there's just a lot of disappointment by Tennessee fans of the way of how the team has looked this year. Although you only have one loss still,
Yeah.
somehow you only have one loss still, so you really can't complain.
Yeah, I don't looking into this game, it's hard to even get any type of read because of how inconsistent both teams have been. I mean, you look at every week, you see in the Discord, Tennessee fans, shout out Bubba, but we're making excuses every week on why we're barely squeaking past these teams and why we're losing to like when they lost to Florida, you can't lie, it was an all-out war in there. But when I look into this game, I see it being very low scoring. Like I think it's gonna be like that Ohio State Penn State game this weekend. I don't think there's gonna be a lot of points scored. I think both defenses are going to lock them down. Tennessee, they got really good pass rush this year, and I think that's gonna be Alabama's kryptonite, as we saw with Texas. Texas was getting through every play, getting back to Joe Milton, and then when that pressure came, he couldn't handle it. So I think Tennessee, I think they have a good chance of winning this weekend. I'm not gonna lie. You think they could win?
I think Tennessee definitely has a chance to win, but Bama being at home and the last time Bama has lost two home games in one season, 14 years ago, don't think it's going to happen. I don't see it happening. I think Jalen Milrow just has enough in the tank to squeak by and win this game by, like, say, 3, 4 points, like 21-17.
Yeah, yeah. It's hard. I don't know. I'm
It
stuck
is
on
hard.
this one. I
It
think
is,
it's gonna
it
be.
is
I think it's
hard.
gonna be a field goal game. Like you said. I think it's
Mhm.
gonna be like a 3, 4 point game. It's gonna be real close. I mean, I'd probably go. I think Bama. I think Bama got it too. I'm not gonna lie. When I look into it, I just can't see Tennessee pulling it out.
I
Um,
just simply like I just simply like Jalen Milrow better than Joe Milton. I think Milrow is just a little bit better than Milton, and I think that is going to be the difference in the game.
yeah, quarterback play down the line. The only thing that scares me is that O line for Bama and the D
Mhm.
line for Tennessee. That's the only thing. Like if Bama had any type of O line, I think they win this game. I think they cover that 10. But I just don't know. I can't get a good read on it. Next, we got Spencer Rattler traveling down to that Mizzou team that we were just talking about. I'm looking at this. This South Carolina team, they're starting to get that offense rolling like they did towards the end of the season last year. Like when they beat who they beat? Was it Clemson last year, last game?
Yep,
Yeah.
they beat Tennessee, Clemson back-to-back games, and then
Yeah, that
they
South
won
Carolina
the bowl
team.
game versus Notre Dame.
Yeah, that South Carolina team is starting to make a return that from last year. It took them a little bit to wake up. Do you think they're back, and do you think they have a chance this week against Missouri?
I definitely think they have a chance this week at Missouri. I do not think they're back though. I just don't see it. I don't see it with Spencer Radler. I think Brady Cook, like he's you could argue that Brady Cook, the Missouri quarterback, is the best quarterback in the SEC right now. Now I get it, Jaden Daniels. I get it. Heisman candidate. Heisman candidate, I get it. But Brady Cook he's not far behind Jaden Daniels. He is
Yeah,
not far behind Jaden Daniels.
yeah. My thing is this South Carolina offense can be rolling, but the problem is when you're giving up 41, 41, 30, 24, 40, 21, you can't win games with no defense. It's impossible.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yep.
especially in the SEC when they're starting to turn into the Big 12 with the way their points are being scored, there's no way that your offense can just win you games. You need to have some type of defense. Like you said, Brady Cook, he got this team rolling right now. And what they have, their environment, Missouri they're turning into a football school. Like we see that all the time with who goes to Missouri from Discord? Is it BK? I think it's BK. But he posted
Yeah,
all
I
the
think
time
so.
that atmosphere in that end zone where all the students are. It kind of reminds me of Penn State a little bit. It's like a mini Penn State. So like South Carolina traveling in there, they're gonna face a lot of adversity in there. And we're gonna see how Spencer Rattler is gonna be if he reacts, how he's gonna react to it. Pressure. He's been there before. He's played at all these SEC schools. So a part of me thinks South Carolina can do it. It's just their defense needs to wake up. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, no, definitely. Their defense is a struggle. It's a disaster. It reminds you of a USC defense, just absolutely abysmal.
Swiss cheese.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely abysmal. I think Missouri can win this game by like 14 to 17 points, but I think they probably win by more like 10. I think it's going to be a little closer because that South Carolina offense is going to be keeping them in the game. But this is definitely going to be the opposite of the first two games we talked about. This should be high scoring. This should
Shootout.
be fireworks. Luther
Yeah.
Burden should go nuts on this South Carolina defense.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Moving on. Now this is probably what I would say the most slept on game of the week. We got Minnesota going to Iowa, a team that is just beat up with injuries. What are we thinking?
Minnesota is definitely a team ever since PJ Fleck has got there that they have trying to think of the word off the top of my head. They have sustained this like consistent of we are going to be a bowl team every single year. And I think PJ Fleck has beaten that into their minds. I think PJ Fleck has beaten it into their minds that we can potentially win the Big Ten West every single year, no matter what team we have. So I think Iowa is beaten up offensively, and the Minnesota offense is also a struggle, definitely a struggle. So, but I think this is going to be like a field goal fest, and definitely a field goal fest.
Yeah, yeah, I think this is gonna be like one of your classic Big 12 games where it's gonna be shitty outside, it's gonna be pouring, it's gonna be who can run the ball better, which Iowa, their defense this year, they're solid. It's like your typical Iowa defense every year. But my thing is when your offense can only take so many injuries until it's gonna end up hurting you as a team. You know what I mean? McCarthy's gone. Their tight end he's supposed to go to the NFL next year. He's gone. Um, I think that's going to catch up to them. And the way Minnesota plays, they're going to grind this game out. I think Minnesota has a legit chance of winning this weekend. By the way they play, they're gonna run the ball, run the ball, run the ball, run the clock. And I think that they'll get that clock going and they'll run that ball down so fast that there's gonna be like 2, 3 possessions a half for each team. That's what I think is gonna happen. So I wouldn't be surprised if Minnesota wins this game. You think they got a chance?
I definitely think they have a chance. Minnesota, I think Minnesota fans are expecting to be a little better than 3-3 at this point in the season. But I think it's also one of the reasons is the quarterback play from Ethan. I'm not even going to try and pronounce his last name.
Pananthathankakos.
It's a wild last name. I ain't even gonna try and pronounce it. But Ethan, their quarterback, I think they were expecting a little more from the sophomore at this point in the season. He has only 6 touchdown passes to 6 interceptions this season, so it's been a little disappointing on him. But the potential that you see in that kid, I mean, there is so much potential in that kid to be a fantastic quarterback and to maybe even play at the next level. So I think this is a weekend where he sees an opportunity to steal a win against a ranked team. I think you're going to see that kid grow up this weekend, and I think you're going to see Minnesota beat Iowa.
like it. I like it. I like it a lot. Um, yeah. So moving on, we got Oklahoma State, West Virginia. The battle for third and fourth place, as you were saying earlier. What are we thinking?
This is a game where if you would have told me in the preseason that Oklahoma State and West Virginia were the third and fourth best teams in the Big 12, I probably would have looked at you like you had three heads on your body. Like if you would have told me that Oklahoma State and West Virginia were just behind Texas and Oklahoma as the next two teams, like it's unreal. And Oklahoma State at the beginning of the season, they looked like they could potentially be one of the worst Power Five teams in college football. They looked horrible, horrid at the beginning of the season, but Coach Gundy's really gotten this team turned around, and I mean they look like a good and solid football team now. And West Virginia, also another team I wasn't really high on in the preseason. You know, I more kind of saw they're more on the young side, other than the quarterback and Garrett Green. They're more on the young side. So I was expecting more of kind of like a 5-7 type year from West Virginia, but they've come out here and they've looked good. They have looked good, and I think that game against Penn State at the beginning of the season really helped them
Yeah,
out to get to where they are right now in their season.
yeah, I think that Penn State game made this team have to grow up. Like they had no chance. Like you come in, you go, you especially when you're playing at Penn State. Like opening, this is probably the best Penn State team that they've ever had in a long time. Sorry, in a long time they've had. But like you go out there and you get the shit kicked out of you, and then you gotta respond to that all season. I'm impressed with the way they responded all season. Like last week, that was a fluke. They should be 5-1 going into this game. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah,
Uh, I
definitely.
look at this team. Shout out to our boy Jaheim White, by the way, the York High representative. I would love to see him play more, but I love this West Virginia offense. Like the way they manage throwing the ball, running the ball. It's like 60% throw, 40% run, which I love that. I love watching teams throw the ball. Uh, but Oklahoma State, emotional victory last week against Kansas. Uh, I don't know how they'll react to that. Either they'll take that momentum and roll with it into Morgantown, or that momentum will kind of die out and then they'll show up dead. Which that's what I think's gonna happen. I think West Virginia's pissed off about last week. I think they'll come out this week and they'll put up about probably like 45 points. And I think that they'll be out to make a statement this weekend. You agree with that?
I 100% agree with that. I think West Virginia is going to beat Oklahoma State. Now, I don't think it's going I do think West Virginia's going to be scoring 45 points, but I think Oklahoma State's going to be right behind them scoring probably 35, 38 points with it. I think it's going to be a close back and forth classic Big 12 game where it's just touchdown after touchdown after touchdown.
Yeah,
I think that's what you're going to see.
Whereas Donnie would say, buckets on buckets on buckets.
Oh yeah.
Who
Oh
wants
yeah.
it more, huh?
You're on,
um,
yeah. That's really what it's going to come down to. Who wants it more? And I think the
yeah.
West Virginia home crowd's going to be able to back them up, and I think West Virginia's going to be able to get that win.
Oh yeah, that place is gonna be rocking. Next, we got Ole Miss going to Jordan Hare to play the Auburn Tigers. Now, Auburn, what is going on? What is going on down there? Do you know?
Dude, I wish I knew, man. This is Auburn is they're one of the most confusing teams I think in all of college football. I don't think anybody knows what they're going to get out of Auburn any week at all. One
Yeah.
one week you're going to get them almost beating Georgia. Next week you're going to get them literally getting pounded into the ground by LSU. You just do not know what Auburn team is going to show up. But what you do know is Auburn is barely going to get any passing yards. That is one thing that you do know.
Yeah, I going into the season, I thought Peyton Thorne was gonna. I thought he was gonna be something. I thought he was gonna lead this Auburn team to be able to actually be like the old Auburn teams that could score. I mean, this year they just look horrible. And like, what are they gonna do? Put Bobby Ashford in? If they put him in, they're in worse shape
Oh,
than if they had Thorne in. So I'm interested in this game to see how Auburn responds because this game is going to kind of represent the rest of their season. I think I think that if they get blown out this game, they throw in the towel on the season. They just focus on next year. But I think I like. I don't even know if they'll make a bowl game if they lose this game, to be honest.
Mhm.
But Ole Miss, I look at the other side of this. This Ole Miss team, man, I think they can win the SEC this year. They slipped up. They slipped up against Alabama, which I understand that they're playing at Alabama as a big game. But I think Jackson Dart is like you said, like how you said Brady Cook's the best QB in SEC. I think Jackson Dart, in my opinion, is the best quarterback in the SEC. But their defense is so shaky. It's kind of hard for me to say that they can win the SEC, but I wouldn't be surprised if they do it. I think that they go into Jordan Hare this weekend. I think they lay the beat down on Auburn, to be honest. I think they're gonna make a statement out of them, and I think Ole Miss keeps this momentum rolling the rest of the season.
I do like this Ole Miss team a lot as well. Jackson Dart, a guy I was never high on, and I said this year that he needed to prove me wrong, and that's exactly what Jackson Dart has done. He does look incredible.
Yeah,
Jackson Dart looks absolutely incredible. I think Ole Miss can walk in here and blow Auburn out of the water as well, but I don't think that is what the result is going to be. I
yeah,
think Ole Miss is going to win this game, but I think just like Georgia, my mistake, just like Georgia escaped out of Jordan Hare, I think that Ole Miss is also going to have to escape out of Jordan Hare. I think you're going to see a more of a closer game. But I do think Ole Miss wins this game.
yeah. I think this Auburn, like, this is probably the equivalent to that Michigan State Michigan game where Michigan State's fans are gonna show up, but this
Mhm.
is like their last like hoorah for the season. Like besides the Iron Bowl at the end of the season, like this is kind of like I don't want to say their Super Bowl, but this is like win or like our season's chalked, like it's done. So I'm definitely interested in that game. I want to see how it plays out. So yeah, let's go on to Duke, Florida State. Coach Elko, defensive mastermind, old defense coordinator at Texas A&M, going to Florida State, arguably the best, most unpredictable team each week. You don't know if they're going to show up. You don't know if they're not. What are we thinking?
This is going to be a very, very, very fun game. This is going to be very fun. You're going to get to see what Duke is really made of in this game. I think you're really going to see what Duke is really made of. Are they a contender or are they a pretender? And I think you're going to see that from Duke, but I also think you're going to see that from Florida State as well, because I think there's a lot of question marks about Florida State as well. Are they really a top four team? Are they really a team that's going to run the table in the ACC, win the ACC championship, and make it to the college football playoff? I think you're going to know after this week.
Yeah, I look at this Duke defense, and last year the problem with Duke was that they didn't have a defense, but they could score. This year is kind of it's like they found that medium. They got a good defense. Coach Elko's a defensive coach. He's been making the adjustments each week. I think their defense mimics a lot of Clemson and Boston College, which they both took FSU to the ropes. FSU they got lucky in those games, and I think Duke's gonna go in there this weekend, and I think that they have a legitimate chance to win this game. I think their offense they can get the ball moving. They switch it up a lot. They aren't one dimensional like all these other teams that Florida State has played. They like to throw it. They like to run it. They like jet sweep. They get it to the outside. They do everything. So I'm excited to see this game and see how Duke's defense comes out because that's gonna be the game. It's gonna be Duke's defense or Florida State's offense. The rest is just gonna unplay itself. So what do you think? You agree with that?
I do not.
No.
I think Florida State's going to pull this out, and I'm going to say this now. I think Florida State, like I said, I do think that Florida State is a top team in the country. I believe in this Florida State team. I really do. I know they've had the shaky games. I know they've had the shaky games, but really, who hasn't had a shaky game yet this year
No, you're
in
right.
college football? Who hasn't? I
You're
think that they are going to run the table. Although that ACC championship game, which right now looks like it's going to line up to be Florida State and North Carolina,
right.
that like crazy as it sounds, that could be two undefeated teams in the ACC title game fighting for a college football playoff spot.
Yeah. No, you're right. And looking ahead. All right, let's look ahead. Let's do it. Why not?
Mhm.
I think I think that game is going to be the race to 60 points. Like there's going to be no defense played in that game, to be honest. I think Drake May, arguably, if they go undefeated this year, I'm going to say this now. If UNC goes undefeated this year, I know I give North Carolina a bunch of shit on the podcast all the time. I think Drake May deserves Heisman if they go undefeated this year. That's a hot take. I know that sounds crazy, but I genuinely believe it's gonna be him or Jordan Travis if they both go undefeated.
Yeah, no. Tez Walker coming back for North Carolina too. That wide receiver transfer that's now allowed to play. I think that's really the X factor for North Carolina that's taking them to the next level. And I
Yeah,
think you saw that in his debut game and in last week's game. I believe he caught 3 touchdown passes in last week's game.
yeah,
So I think Tez Walker is that X factor that Drake May needed to get that offense to the next level to be able to consistently score that 40 points a game.
yeah. He's a monster. Um,
Mm-hmm.
all right, so here's the game. Is USC fraudulent or are they not? They got Utah coming to town. USC, they look shaky. Ever since the ASU game, they look shaky. What do we think? Utah coming off decent win over Cal, lost to Oregon State. What are we thinking?
This all depends on the health of Cam Rising. It really, really does. Cam Rising makes that Utah team. Cam Rising is the leader of that Utah team. I think that if Cam Rising plays in this game, I mean, we've seen it in the past, Utah owns USC, and that is quite obvious. Utah owns USC. And I think that Utah can win this game if Cam Rising plays. But if Cam Rising doesn't play, I mean, the Utah offense just isn't good enough to keep up with the USC offense. Because, yes, Utah's defense is one of the best defenses in all of college football, but we know USC is going to score some points. And we know if Caleb Williams is coming off the worst game of his career, you can bet he's probably going to bounce back and have one hell of a game.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's just the comparison between Utah's defense and Notre Dame's defense is kind of it's a little bit different to me. I think a lot of people, like you were saying, Utah's defense is good, but
Mm-hmm.
those linebackers are nothing like Notre Dame's linebackers. Like when I watched that game this past weekend, the way Notre Dame's linebackers flow to the ball is so different compared to any other team. Like those guys are all NFL guys. I think Utah, their linebackers are solid, but I think there's a drop off between that. And I think Caleb Williams is going to be able to do a lot on his feet this week. I think he'll be able to run all over this Utah defense, which we've seen him do. We've seen him do like in the San Jose State game this year. He ran all over him. I think that we're going to see that come out of him. And I think USC actually is going to bounce back. I wouldn't be surprised if Utah did win this game because the way USC has looked their past 3 games. I wouldn't be surprised. But I think that they have to do something this game or else they're done.
Yeah, no, definitely. USC, I mean, with USC is in a must-win situation. After last week, people are calling them frauds. People are saying they don't even deserve to be ranked in the top 25. I mean, this is if you're USC, this is a must-win situation. But on another note, I think right now, if Cam Rising played a full season at Utah this year, I think that this is a different conversation. And we're talking about Utah potentially being national championship contenders. That's how good I think that team could be with Cam Rising at quarterback.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. It's just they need something going on offense. It's abysmal.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so let's get to the last game here. Clemson versus Miami. The U down at the U Hard Rock. I don't know if they get a crowd out there for their games. Half the people are drunk and clubbing by that time. What are we thinking?
I think that people are viewing this Clemson team as like as bad. Like they're bad. And like I think people really overreacted from that week 1 loss to Duke. And Clemson didn't take Florida State down to the wire, take them to overtime for no reason. Clemson didn't take them to overtime for no reason. They had that game won. If they didn't have so many kicking issues this year, I mean, that game is won by Clemson. There's no doubt about it. They win that game. Florida State has 1 loss. Clemson has 1 loss. Clemson's probably back close to the top 10 right now if they win that game. So I think there was definitely a big overreaction by everyone in Clemson losing to Duke in week 1. So I think Clemson walks into Miami, and I think they take this one by like 20 points.
Yeah, yeah. I'm on the other side for that. I think Miami, their past two games have has helped this team is gonna help this team grow for the future. And I think that Georgia Tech game where their coach fucked up. I mean, that was rough. I ain't gonna lie. Um, I think that game made this team carry that momentum into UNC where they just didn't show up. I think this week they come back home. I think that they get everything back together and they get back moving. I think that they're going to be able to throw the ball a lot on Clemson. That's Clemson's weakness. They give up a lot of yards in the air. So I think Miami is going to have to throw the ball, and I think their defense is going to get rolling and back on track this week. Clemson, they're coming off a win over Wake Forest. Wake Forest is okay. I mean, but I look into it. I like the U this weekend. They're at home. Hopefully they get a crowd. I don't know because, like I said, I watch their games at home and there's like nobody there. But we'll see. I don't. This game kind of confusing to me. Clemson, you don't know which Clemson team's going to show up. So I don't know. What else? You got anything else?
I will say one thing about the crowd at Miami. I think what people don't realize is like the stadium looks more empty than it actually is because they're playing at an NFL stadium.
Yeah, that's true.
They're playing at an NFL stadium compared to other campus, like colleges playing at campuses. So really, in reality, I think they're probably getting just about the same amount of people in the stadium as like any other college would. But I just don't think like you really get to see that because they're in an NFL stadium. You see all these empty seats in the background. You see nobody sitting up top. So I think that does not. I mean, that doesn't benefit Miami viewing wise, at least.
Yeah, yeah. So closing remarks before we get out of here.
Mm.
Who's your final four this year?
My final four this year. Give me Give me Washington, give me Georgia, give me Michigan, give me Florida State in that order.
Eh, I like Washington. All right, this is gonna sound really homer of me. I like Washington. I
Mhm.
think they're gonna win the Pac-12 easily. I
I
don't think
agree.
anybody's gonna give them trouble. I like Washington. Penn State. I think if they beat Ohio State this weekend, they're in regardless of the Michigan game, because then they're gonna end up playing a Big Ten championship against who will be Wisconsin. No, I don't even know who it'd be against. It'd be against
Right now it's Iowa who they already
yeah,
destroyed, but
which they killed
obviously a
them.
lot of football to be played, and the Big Ten West is always just it's always a cluster.
Yeah.
Always a cluster.
So I like Washington, Penn State, and then man, it's gonna pain me to say this. Tristan, if you're listening, I know you're gonna be like, oh man. I think North Carolina makes it, as much as I hate to say it. And then from the SEC, I want to say Ole Miss. I think Ole Miss makes it. I think that they're gonna win. They're gonna win the SEC. That's a hot take. I know. I said it before the season. That and I'm still on them. I know they slipped up against Bama, but I think they can win out. But yeah,
I think the only issue with Ole Miss getting into the college football playoff right now is they need Alabama to lose 2 games to even get into the SEC championship game. So I think that could be the only reason that Ole Miss does not make it to the Final Four for
yeah,
sure. Because is Alabama really going to lose 2 more games in the SEC West? They're definitely going. Well, I'm not going to definitely say this, but LSU is definitely better than Alabama. LSU can definitely beat Alabama for sure. I think Ole Miss is going to have to rely on the opponent that they're playing this weekend that they need to beat Auburn in the final week of the season to make it
yeah,
and upset Alabama to make it to that SEC title game against Georgia, which Ole Miss plays Georgia soon. They play
yeah.
Georgia very soon, and I think
I think
with
they
no
can
Brock
beat them.
Bowers, yeah,
Yeah,
I think with no Brock Bowers, as long as the Ole Miss defense shows up, as long as Jackson Dart is at that elite level, Ole Miss could probably win that game too. So
yeah,
I definitely think Ole Miss has their opportunity, but they definitely don't control their own destiny, and I think that's what's going to hurt them.
yeah. So yeah, so that's our predictions. That's what we got going on. So closer remarks, just check out the Discord. It's a good time. You meet new people all the time out there, and it's a great environment. We're a little family. We always give each other a hard time, make jokes, all that. Make sure you show love to TikTok, subscribe to YouTube, go to Coach Call that store. We got merch. I don't have it on. I had my jersey on earlier. I got it here somewhere. But yeah, check out the store, check out everything. Yeah, so we're out of here. Kbehm from York, Jeff from York. We'll see you guys again. I gotta close it.